You know, they say the open road is freedom, the ultimate escape from the mundane grind of everyday life. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes that freedom comes wrapped in the disguise of pure evil, a predator hiding behind a friendly smile and the hum of tires on asphalt. I was just 19, barely an adult, still buzzing with that reckless optimism that makes you think the world is yours to conquer, when I decided to hitchhike across the country for the first time. It started as this romantic idea, you know, backpacking with nothing but a worn-out backpack, a thumb in the air, and dreams of seeing new places, meeting strangers who might share stories that would change me forever. I imagined sunsets over endless highways, late-night talks about life with kind souls, the thrill of the unknown pulling me forward like gravity. But standing there on the shoulder of that dusty interstate outside my small hometown, backpack slung over one shoulder, the reality hit differently when the sun began to dip low and cars whizzed by without slowing down. Hours passed, my legs aching, throat dry, doubts creeping in, but I pushed them aside because quitting would mean admitting I wasn't ready for real adventure. Then, around dusk, this beat-up old sedan pulled over, engine rumbling like a tired beast, and the driver rolled down the window with a warm grin that seemed genuine enough to ease my growing unease. "Need a lift, kid?" he asked, voice gravelly but friendly, eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses, even though the light was fading fast. I hesitated for a split second, but youth makes you bold, or maybe stupid, so I hopped in, thanking him profusely as the car accelerated back onto the highway, leaving my hometown shrinking in the rearview mirror. His name was Jack, or at least that's what he said. Mid-40s maybe, scruffy beard flecked with gray, wearing a faded flannel shirt that smelled faintly of cigarettes, and something metallic I couldn't quite place at first. We started chatting, easy enough, the kind of small talk that fills the awkward silence of strangers thrown together by chance. I told him about dropping out of community college because books felt like chains compared to the call of the wild, how I wanted to see the mountains up north, maybe find work on a farm, or just drift until I figured out who I really was. He nodded along, sharing bits about his own life, truck driving gigs, long hauls that took him across state lines, divorced with no kids, always on the move because settling down felt like dying slowly. It was comforting at first, this shared sense of rootlessness, like we were both rebels against the system chasing horizons. The radio played soft classic rock, windows cracked to let in the cool evening air, and for those first 100 miles or so, I felt alive, really alive, heart pounding with the excitement of possibility. But then things started shifting, subtle at first, cracks in the facade that my instincts picked up before my brain fully registered them. He'd ask these probing questions about my family, whether anyone knew exactly where I was going, if I had a girlfriend waiting or parents who might worry. A young guy like you, hitchhiking alone, brave, real brave, but dangerous too, you know? World ain't kind to wanderers. His tone stayed casual, but there was this undercurrent, something hungry in the way he glanced over at me too often, fingers tapping the steering wheel in a rhythm that felt off, almost predatory. I laughed it off, telling myself I was paranoid from too many true crime podcasts my friends had warned me about, but deep down, a knot formed in my stomach, tightening with every mile. As night fully swallowed the road, the conversation turned darker, reflective in a way that made my skin crawl. He started talking about loss, how he'd lost people close to him. "Taken too soon," he said, voice dropping low, eyes fixed on the black ribbon of highway ahead, lit only by headlights cutting through the void. He described this emptiness inside, a void that nothing filled. Not booze, not work, not even the fleeting connections on the road. "Sometimes you gotta take what you need, kid. The universe don't hand out second chances." There was a philosophical bent to it, like he was unloading some heavy existential weight, pondering the fragility of life, how one wrong turn could end everything, how people underestimate the darkness lurking in ordinary folks. I tried steering it lighter, asking about his favorite stops along the route, but he'd circle back, probing my vulnerabilities, my fears of being alone, whether I believed in fate or if I thought some people were just born to hunt while others were prey. The car felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker, and I noticed little details that screamed wrong. The door handle on my side seemed jammed or modified somehow, no interior lights working when he flicked the switch accidentally, and under the seat. When I shifted, my foot brushed something hard and cold like metal, maybe a tool or worse. My mind raced, piecing together the warnings I'd ignored, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the faint scars on his knuckles visible when he gripped the wheel. Reflection hit me hard then, in those tense, silent stretches between words. At 19, I thought I understood freedom. But here I was, trapped in a metal box, hurtling through nowhere, questioning every choice that led me here, wondering if my thirst for adventure was just naivety dressed up as courage. What does it mean to trust strangers when the world is full of hidden monsters? How do you reconcile the beauty of the unknown with its capacity for horror? These thoughts swirled like a storm in my head, adrenaline sharpening my senses, heartbeat thundering in my ears louder than the engine. The turning point came when he pulled off onto a deserted service road, claiming he needed to stretch his legs and check the tires. But the isolation of the spot, no lights, no other cars for miles, sent pure terror surging through me. "Come on out, help me with this," he said, voice still calm but edged now, reaching under his seat for something I couldn't see. In that instant, survival mode kicked in, every instinct screaming to run. But I played it cool, pretending to fumble with my backpack while my fingers closed around the small pocket knife I'd packed for camping, heart slamming against my ribs. He stepped out first, circling to my side, and that's when I saw it in the dim glow of the interior light he'd finally turned on. The duct tape roll peeking from the glove compartment, zip ties, and worst of all, the dark stains on the floor mat that looked too much like old blood. Panic flooded me, but with it came a strange clarity, a deep reflection on life's fragility, how one hitchhike could strip away illusions of safety, teaching you that true freedom demands constant vigilance, that youth's invincibility is a lie we tell ourselves to keep moving forward. I waited until he bent down by the tire, then I bolted, shoving the door open with all my strength, knife in hand slashing wildly as he lunged, catching his arm enough to make him howl and stumble back. The chase was a blur of darkness, gravel biting my knees as I tripped, his footsteps pounding behind me yelling something incoherent about not fighting it. But I zigzagged into the woods lining the road, branches whipping my face, lungs burning, mind racing with thoughts of family I'd never see again, regrets for not texting my mom my location, philosophical musings on whether this was karma for chasing thrills or just random cruelty in an indifferent universe. I hid in a thicket for what felt like hours, listening to him search, cursing, engine revving eventually as he drove off, leaving me alone in the cold night with nothing but survival, and the profound realization that escape wasn't just physical but a mental rebirth, forcing me to confront how little we control and how instincts honed by fear can be our greatest ally. Hours later, shivering and bruised, I flagged down a trucker who actually helped, called the cops from his CB radio, and the nightmare unfolded in statements and searches that confirmed my worst fears. Jack, or whatever his real name was, had a history, missing hitchhikers along similar routes, a pattern of luring young travelers with that same disarming charm. Sitting in the police station wrapped in a blanket, recounting every detail, I dove deep into reflection, pondering the duality of humanity, how a man could philosophize about life's meaning while plotting to end one, the thin line between connection and predation, how my 19-year-old self emerged not broken but forged stronger, with a newfound respect for boundaries, for listening to that inner voice warning of danger. The escape taught me that adventure's true value lies not in recklessness, but in awareness, that the road can break you or rebuild you, depending on whether you heed its shadows. Yet even now, years later, I sometimes wake up to phantom headlights, questioning if I truly outran the darkness or if it lingers, waiting for the next young dreamer thumbing a ride. But that's the cost of chasing freedom, I suppose, a story that haunts and humbles in equal measure, reminding us all that survival is the ultimate reflection on what it means to be alive. The trucker who picked me up that night, he was this big, quiet guy named Earl, beard like steel wool, hands scarred from decades of hauling freight. Didn't ask too many questions at first, just saw me stumbling out of the tree line onto the shoulder, clothes torn, face scratched bloody from branches, shaking so hard I could barely stand. He didn't even hesitate. Pulled the rig over, lights flashing red and yellow across the empty highway like some kind of guardian angel in a Peterbilt. "Get in, kid," he said, voice low and steady. "You're safe now." I climbed up into the cab, legs like jelly, and the second the door closed behind me, I started crying. Not loud sobs, just this silent, unstoppable leaking of tears I couldn't control. Everything I'd held back during the chase, during those endless minutes crouched in the bushes, listening to him circle and curse, it all came rushing out. Earl didn't say a word about it, just handed me a half-empty bottle of water and a clean shop rag from the glove box. "Drink slow," he muttered. "Breathe." We drove in silence for maybe 20 miles before I could speak. When I finally started talking, it all poured out. Jack's name, or the name he gave me. The way he'd talked about taking what you need, the duct tape, the stains, the knife I'd used on his arm, the sprint into the woods, how I'd kept running even, after I couldn't hear him anymore. Earl listened without interrupting, just nodding every now and then. When I finished, he reached over, turned the CB radio volume up a little, and said into the mic, "Breaker 19, this is Big Earl. Got a situation here. Young hitchhiker just escaped a real bad actor. Possible 10 to 31 in progress. Needs state boys at mile marker 214 on I-80 westbound. Suspect driving a late model brown Chevy Impala. Partial plate Charlie Alpha 7 something. Kids cut up but alive. Over." The response came almost immediately. Multiple voices, troopers confirming they were rolling, asking for descriptions. Earl gave them everything I'd told him, calm and precise, like he'd done this before. Then he looked at me. "They'll get him, son, or they'll get close enough that he'll never feel safe pulling over for anyone again." We pulled into a truck stop just before dawn. Earl bought me coffee and a plate of eggs I couldn't eat. I sat there staring at the steam rising from the mug, trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was still breathing, still here. Every few minutes I'd catch my reflection in the window, pale, wild-eyed, hair matted with sweat and leaves, and I barely recognized myself. The boy who'd stuck his thumb out yesterday morning felt like a stranger now. That kid had believed the world was mostly good, that strangers were mostly kind, that adventure was worth any risk. The person staring back at me knew better. The state police arrived around sunrise. 2 troopers, one older with kind eyes, one younger who looked like he was still figuring out how to carry the weight of the badge. They took me into a small office behind the truck stop restaurant. I told the story again, slower this time, trying to remember every detail. The smell of his car, cigarettes, and something coppery. The way he kept adjusting the rear-view mirror to watch me more than the road. The moment I saw the duct tape and realized I wasn't getting out unless I fought. They recorded everything. When I got to the part about slashing his arm with my little folding knife, the younger trooper actually smiled. Just a small, grim twitch of the lips. "Good instincts," he said quietly. "That might have saved your life." They photographed my scratches, the bruises on my wrists where I'd hit the ground running, the shallow cut on my palm from gripping the knife too hard. Then they asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you want to press charges if we catch him?" I laughed, a short, bitter sound that surprised even me. "If you catch him," I said, "I want him gone. I want him locked up so deep he forgets what daylight looks like." They found the car abandoned 2 days later in a cornfield 30 miles north. Driver's side door open, blood on the seat and steering wheel. No sign of him. But they found other things in the trunk. More duct tape, zip ties, a roll of heavy plastic sheeting, a hunting knife with dried blood on the blade that didn't match mine, and, worst of all, 3 driver's licenses belonging to young men who'd vanished along that same stretch of highway over the past 4 years. None of them had ever made it home. I stayed with Earl for 3 days while the investigation rolled on. He had a little house outside Des Moines. Nothing fancy, just a single wide trailer with a porch and a yard full of old truck parts. He cooked terrible chili and let me sleep on the pull-out couch. We didn't talk much about what happened. Instead, he told me stories about the road, funny ones mostly, about drivers who'd fallen asleep at the wheel, about the time he hauled a trailer full of live chickens that got loose on the interstate. He never once made me feel like a victim. He treated me like a survivor. And maybe that's what I needed most. On the 3rd morning, I woke up before dawn, sat on his porch steps with a mug of instant coffee, and watched the sky turn pink. For the first time since that night, I felt something like peace. Not the naive excitement of before, but something quieter, heavier. I understood now that freedom isn't just about moving forward. It's about knowing when to fight, when to run, when to trust your gut, even when every polite instinct tells you to smile and stay quiet. I understood that the world isn't divided neatly into good people and bad people. Sometimes the monster smiles, offers you a ride, talks about philosophy and loss like he's just another lonely soul. Sometimes the only thing standing between you and the dark is a 3-inch pocket knife and the will to use it. I hitched again eventually. Not right away. Took me almost a year, but when I did, I was different. I watched faces more carefully. I listened harder to the silences between words. I kept my knife closer, and every time someone pulled over, every time I opened that passenger door, I felt it. The thin electric thread of danger that runs through every human encounter. It's terrifying, but it's also alive. That's the real cost of the road, I think. Not the miles, not the weather, not even the risk of meeting someone like Jack. It's the knowledge you carry afterward, that the world is beautiful and brutal in equal measure, and that survival sometimes means looking evil in the eye and refusing to blink. I still dream about headlights in the dark. I still wake up sometimes reaching for the knife that isn't there anymore, but when I close my eyes again, I remind myself, I made it out. I'm still here. And every mile I walk now, every ride I take, every stranger I meet, I carry that night with me like armor. Because the road doesn't care if you're brave or scared. It only cares if you keep moving. And I'm still moving. That year after the escape changed everything about me, but not in the way people expect. Everyone thinks surviving something like that either breaks you completely or turns you into some unbreakable superhero. Neither happened. I didn't become fearless. I just became awake. Permanently. Like someone had flipped a switch in my brain and now I could never turn it off again. I went back home for a while. My mom cried for 3 straight days when I walked through the door looking like I'd been dragged through hell. She hugged me so tight I could feel her heartbeat against my ribs, and she kept whispering, "You're home, you're home." Like if she said it enough times, the nightmare would dissolve. My dad didn't say much. He's not a words guy, but he spent the next month quietly fixing up my old room, putting new locks on every door and window, installing motion lights in the yard. He never asked me to explain what happened. He just made the house feel like a fortress. I think that was his way of saying he was sorry he couldn't protect me from the world. I tried going back to normal, enrolled in classes again, got a part-time job at a coffee shop, hung out with friends who wanted to hear the story like it was some wild adventure tale. They'd lean in with wide eyes and say things like, "Dude, that's insane," or "You're a legend." I smiled and nodded and changed the subject because how do you explain that every time someone laughed too loud or a car slowed down near me on the sidewalk, my stomach dropped like I was falling? How do you tell them that you still check the backseat of every Uber before you get in, even though you know it's empty? How do you admit that you keep a knife under your pillow, not the little folding one anymore, a real one, 6-inch blade, and sometimes you wake up holding it so tight your knuckles are white? Therapy helped, sort of. The counselor was patient, middle-aged woman with soft eyes who never pushed too hard. She let me talk in circles for months before I finally admitted the thing that scared me most. I didn't hate Jack. Not really. I hated what he did, what he was, but part of me felt this twisted pity, curiosity. He'd talked about that emptiness inside him like it was a living thing eating him from the inside out. And for one terrifying night, I'd felt a shadow of that same emptiness brush against me. What if, in some other life, under different circumstances, I could have become someone like him? What if the only difference between us was that I'd had enough love, enough safety nets, enough luck to never fall that far? She didn't judge me for saying it. She just asked quietly, "Do you think understanding his pain makes what he did forgivable?" And I said no, never. But it did make it human, and that was somehow worse. After about 8 months, I couldn't stay still anymore. The walls of my hometown started closing in. Every street corner reminded me of the shoulder where I'd stuck out my thumb. Every friendly stranger felt like a potential threat. So I packed the same backpack, same one that had been in that car with him, and I hit the road again. This time I wasn't hitchhiking blind. I planned better. I told people my route. I shared my location. I carried pepper spray, a personal alarm, a second phone hidden in my sock, and most importantly, I listened to my gut. If something felt even slightly off, the way someone looked at me too long, the way they asked too many personal questions, the way the silence in the car stretched too thin, I made an excuse and got out. No apologies, no explanations, just thanks for the ride, I'll walk from here. The first few rides were nerve-wracking. My hands would sweat the second I sat down. I'd memorize license plates, note exit numbers, keep my backpack between my knees so I could grab it fast. But slowly, mile by mile, something shifted. I started meeting the good ones again. The retired couple who drove me 200 miles out of their way because you looked like you needed a hot meal. The college kid who blasted music and sang off-key with me until we were both laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. The trucker who told me about his daughter my age and said, if she ever hitchhiked, I'd pray someone like me picked her up. Those rides reminded me that the darkness isn't the whole story. It's loud, it's terrifying, it leaves scars, but it's not everything. I still think about Jack. Every time I see an old brown Chevy, every time I hear gravel crunch under tires at night, every time someone offers me a ride and their smile is just a little too eager, I wonder if he's still out there, if he's still hunting, if he ever thinks about the kid who got away. I wonder if he's sitting in some dingy motel room right now staring at the ceiling, feeling that same emptiness gnawing at him. And sometimes, in the quiet moments between rides, I allow myself a small, dark thought. I hope he is. I hope he never stops feeling it, because if he's still alive, still free, then every mile I travel is a reminder that I won. I survived. I kept moving. And I'm never going to stop. The road is still beautiful, still brutal, still full of shadows. But now I walk through them with my eyes wide open. And I'm still here. I kept going, not just to prove I could anymore, but because the road had become part of me. It had seeped into my skin, my blood, every breath I took. I wasn't chasing adventures anymore. I was chasing myself in every new curve, every new face, every new smell of gasoline and wet asphalt after rain. One night in South Dakota, an old man picked me up in a pickup truck so ancient, it looked like it had been built before World War II. His name was Roy. He was well over 70, voice rough like he'd spent his life smoking pipe tobacco out of old tin cans. He didn't ask where I was headed. Just said, hop in, kid. Out here at night, wolves make better company than some folks. We drove in silence for maybe 2 hours, only the radio crackling with old country songs that Roy hummed along to under his breath. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. You know, I used to run from someone too, only it wasn't a person, it was myself. I turned to look at him. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, his face looked like an old map. Every wrinkle was a road he'd once driven away on. My boy, he continued, voice dropping so low I almost couldn't hear it over the engine. He was 21, same age you look, loved the road just like you do, said it made him feel free. One summer he took off hitchhiking west, never came back. He let the words hang there, heavy as wet rope. They found his backpack 2 years later in a ditch outside Cheyenne. No body, just the pack. And inside it, a little notebook, pages full of his handwriting. Stories about people he met, sunrises he saw, how alive he felt every damn mile. Roy's hands tightened on the wheel. His knuckles went white. I spent the next 10 years driving every highway he might have driven, looking for answers, looking for him, looking for anything. Never found a damn thing, but I kept driving, because stopping would have meant admitting he was really gone. He glanced over at me then, eyes wet but steady. You got out, kid. That's more than a lot of folks get. Don't waste it running from shadows. Run towards something instead. We didn't speak again until he dropped me off at a rest area just before dawn. He handed me a thermos of coffee and an old wool blanket from the back seat. Keep moving, he said, but keep your eyes open. The road gives as much as it takes. I watched his taillights disappear into the gray morning light, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. I felt grateful. Grateful for the miles still ahead. Grateful for the strangers who weren't monsters. Grateful that I'd been given a second chance to keep going. From then on, every ride felt different. I started talking more, asking questions, listening harder. I collected stories the way some people collect postcards. The trucker who lost his wife to cancer and kept driving because the silence at home was louder than any engine. The runaway girl who was heading to California to become a singer, even though she couldn't carry a tune. The Vietnam vet who still checked his mirrors for VC in the tree line. Every one of them carrying their own invisible scars, their own nights they barely survived. And slowly, mile by mile, I started to heal. Not the kind of healing where the wound disappears. The kind where the scar tissue gets tough enough that you can finally touch it without flinching. I still carry the knife, still check the back seat, still wake up sometimes reaching for a door handle that isn't there. But now, when I stick my thumb out on the side of the road, I do it with something new in my chest. Not fear, not even courage exactly. Something quieter. Something like hope. Because the road is still long, still dark in places, still full of wolves wearing human skin. But it's also full of people like Roy, like Earl, like the 1,000 others who stopped, who shared a coffee, who said, "You're safe now," when I needed to hear it most. And as long as there are still good people out there willing to pull over, I'll keep hitchhiking. I'll keep telling the story. I'll keep moving forward, because that's what survivors do. We don't stop. We just learn how to drive through the dark with the headlights on.